Hello, everyone. And my name is Alan Dick. And on behalf of my fellow Commerce Next co-founders, Scott Silverman and Veronica Sonsev, I want to welcome you to today's webinar. Today is Wednesday, July 21st, 2021, and our topic today is the right insights, the key to improving site experience. With us today, we are joined by our speakers, and they are Sarah Schultz. She's the AVP, E-commerce Product Management and Web Operations at Ann Taylor. Matt Powell, he's a Chief Technology Officer at FTD. Stephanie Urban, VP of E-commerce at Urban Digital. And Kirsten Knipp, the CMO at Full Story. Speakers, thank you so much for joining us today. We'll bring you guys up in just a little bit. I also want to thank our webinar sponsor, Full Story. Thank you so much for making today's webinar possible. Also want to thank our gifting partner, GiftNow. What I have not told our speakers is each one of them gets a gift from GiftNow for participating in this, as well as 5 lucky live audience attendees that will be selected at random at the end of this webinar. Sorry, replay listeners, you got to be here live to get the gifts. So thank you. All right, today's agenda. We're going to show you where you can find some more great Commerce Next content. Going to go over some housekeeping notes just to make certain you get the most out of the webinar and the webinar technology. Kirsten's going to briefly discuss how to best deliver customer delight and drive more revenue with digital experience intelligence. We're going to take some questions from you guys, our audience Q&A. We're going to do some poll questions, and then we're going to head over to a panel discussion. So next week, Scott Silverman takes the reins, and he's going to be talking with his panel about the new performance marketing playbook for back to school, holiday 2021, and beyond. That's next week, July 28th at 2 p.m. Eastern. We also are back live and in person again on September 28th and 29th at the New York Hilton Midtown. The Commerce Next in Real Life Conference is up and running. We've got an absolutely fantastic set of speakers, and we're confirming more every week. That is going to be good. If you want to learn more about that, head over to commercenext.com and apply for your ticket today. Also, we've been doing some podcasting here, and the next one is going to be with Hector Chopra, talking about moving at elf speed. This is about the type of internal company structure and way of thinking about things in order to make innovation a reality at your company. So that's Hector Chopra. If you want to learn more about that, that's at commercenext.com/podcast, and that's presented by Wunderkind. If you missed any past events, no problem. We got you covered. You can find over 110 different videos from previous events on YouTube. That's youtube.com/commercenext. All right, let's do some housekeeping. First off, don't worry about missing anything. We're recording this webinar and we'll make it available tomorrow. If you have registered for this, and even if you didn't attend, this is for the replay folks, we will let you know by email. So you'll be able to see this. Let me show you where things are on your screen. So the 4 functions I want to show you in the upper right-hand portion of your screen, it's chat, Q&A, polls, and handouts. Chat, pretty straightforward. If you want to chat with the other attendees or make general comments, that's the place to do it. Q&A is where you get to ask our speakers questions, and we strongly encourage you to do this. The whole reason we're here is to help inform our audience, and if you've got something you want answered, please feel free to ask it. You do that in the Q&A field. The reason we have you do it there is because everyone else can upvote it. That signals us and tells us what questions are the most important, which ones we really have got to get to. So please ask those questions and upvote the ones you like. When you enter the question or chat, that happens in the lower right-hand portion of your screen. And finally, we've got a couple of handouts for you, including the slides that Kirsten's going to be presenting in just a moment. And if you're watching this on a replay, just look for the document icon at the bottom of the replay screen, and all the documents will be there. All righty, and that takes care of the opening part of our webinar. Kirsten, how are you?
Hey, I'm doing great, Alan. How are you?
Good, good, good. Well, thank you guys so much for sponsoring today. We really appreciate it. I'm going to turn it over to you and let you talk about delivering consumer delight.
Awesome. Alan, thanks so much for that warm welcome, and hello, everybody. I'm Kirsten, as you said, and our team at Full Story helps e-commerce customers like Matt's team at FTD and brands like Lowe's, Peloton, and Lucky Vitamin increase revenue and decrease costs, all by understanding not just what their customers are doing, but why? We have what we call a digital experience intelligence platform that is the only tagless and retroactive solution that helps brands like you answer questions you didn't even know you had. So before we jump into the panel, what I thought we could do today is ground ourselves in some data and some of the possibilities from a tools and talent perspective that I think will shape the conversation. So let's start right here. In April of this year, we actually fielded a consumer survey of 1,500 consumers, and they told us resoundingly something that probably won't surprise you. 81% of them plan to maintain or increase their use of digital. Great. That's consistent with my experience as well. I've been shopping more online, looking at travel, engaging with friends and family. So no surprise there. We asked them as well, what makes a really good experience? And what might surprise you is that it's actually not fancy bells and whistles that they're really looking for. The majority, 83%, simply said, I want to quickly accomplish what I came to do, right? We want to get things done. In some cases, we're there to browse and explore, but when we have something that is a transaction, we want to get it done. We want to complete and submit forms without problems. And the third most popular, interestingly, is that I want to trust that my information is private and secure. And in today's era, our opportunity as brands to really build trust with these consumers is super important. So there's a lot here that's not rocket science, and there are things that we should all be thinking about. Now, unfortunately, what they also told us is that negative experiences and frustrations abound. I don't know if you've had this experience lately, but we talk about a variety of different issues. One of them we affectionately call rage clicks. That's when you click something, it doesn't do what you expect. You click it again, it still doesn't do it. And then you click it multiple times fast, and you end up in this position where clearly the website, the mobile app, whatever it might be, is not behaving the way that you expected it to, and it leaves you feeling unsatisfied and unable to complete that transaction. So we asked those same experiences, same consumers, what were the things that were causing frustration in their experience? And a lot of them are sort of simple basics. Page glitches were the number one set of issues. So you can think of that as just traditional bugs, right? Things that don't work the way that you designed them. Maybe they're not reloading or the like. But we also saw things like forms that don't accept certain types of data. I have a hyphenated last name, and for years that plagued me with the airlines. Honestly, they didn't know what to do with new bold commit. It confused them to no end. Now that has started to become a little more normal, but we still see 404 errors or even simple UI errors where consumers don't know what to do next to simply get their transaction done. So that sort of brings us into the customer journey and why we're here today. Consumers are going to be online more, right? And yet they're feeling a lot of frustrations, and all of those frustrations are not just a single moment in time, but they're part of a digital journey. And our observation at Full Story is that a lot of brands simply don't have access to the data to well understand that journey and to understand how their consumers are engaging their digital properties in a way that maybe was different than what they had intended. And that's really what we're here to talk about today, because the painful reality is that most consumers won't actually give you a second chance when they have a bad experience. 1 in 3 consumers walk away from a business they love after a single bad experience. And that's from a business that they love. And unfortunately, the reality there too is over 90% won't tell you what's wrong. They leave a brand without complaining. I'm an ex-hospitality person, and we have a parable we call the customer who doesn't come back. And it's that customer who thinks they're being polite, but they're actually not. They're not going to fill out your comment card. They're not telling you when they check out that this wasn't the best experience. They simply decide to take their business elsewhere. And that's what's happening online every day today. So for brands who are thinking about the old and traditional way of doing things with static analytics and VOC surveys, they're really only getting part of the story. And that's essentially why we exist. It leaves you with more questions than answers. So today's panel, as we talk about a variety of things, we can ground ourselves in that data, but also think about the question that Alan posed. What are the right insights? We believe that the right insights are a combination. They're a combination of what data and why data. So we'll talk briefly about what that is and a brand or two who are doing this live today, and then jump into the panel. What do I mean by what data? So what data is qualitative data? And it's really the data that tells you exactly the steps, the things that are happening on your digital properties. And for example, the chart on the left here shows you a little bit of what the happy path might have been that we designed. We believed our customers would go from point A to point B to point C. And that happy path is what some percentage of users do. But it turns out that there are a very large number of shoppers, site visitors, who actually take a completely different path. Maybe they do something we didn't expect, and that can result in frustration or lost conversion. And the idea of quantitative data is that it is helping you at scale aggregate those insights to point out the areas where there are the most opportunities for bug fixes or even upside on your site. That could be things like images of flowers that maybe people are clicking on a lot because they want to zoom them out. They want to see, what does that bouquet look like that I'm going to send to my aunt? And gives you the insight that perhaps you need to add new images, make them larger, do something different that could drive up revenue besides just fixing those page glitches and form errors that we talked about. That quantitative data is not enough. And the reality is where Full Story sort of comes in is we marry quantitative data that is born out of session replay into quantitative insights, and then also allow folks to double click down to understand qualitative data. And qualitative data is really the descriptive data that helps you understand why something is going on. It's all well and good for us to know that at step 3 in a funnel, people are dropping off. But unless we can build empathy for their personal experience, it's really hard to understand the why. So the graphic here is intended to represent an anonymized user visit, right? Understanding where in this customer journey, if I actually watch a playback of a session, where are they falling off? What does that look like? We have a customer who actually identified that they had a bunch of people dropping off at checkout after putting many, many things in their cart. And they could see checkout and the cart issue. What they couldn't see without going into session replay was that this was a pro at a home improvement store who was having to go from store to store to store to add things to his cart and got frustrated because there wasn't one store that had everything. So their ability to see that frustration, that cringeworthy moment happen was what helped them create some new processes for those pros. But all that can be done in a really privacy-friendly way that helps you understand patterns at scale. So marrying quantitative and qualitative data to understand those patterns is really, really important. And I say patterns because the last data point I want to make is about privacy. We'll talk a little bit about it in the panel, but we all know cookies of the future, they will be gone, they will be different. And first-party cookies, first-party data is really kind of the rich data set that we'll be able to leverage. What we want to think about is how can we, in a privacy-friendly way, actually anonymize data at scale to be able to understand these patterns. And that's where here what you're seeing is the idea of masking data that we don't need to know. I don't need to know Alan's name or address to recognize that 5,000 people on this particular shopping cart had an issue perhaps with an address line. That type of anonymized insight at scale is what's helping brands left and right figure out what to do to optimize those digital experiences. So I'd like to talk about one quick example. You may be familiar with Moose Jaw. They are one of the leading specialty and outdoor apparel vendors out there, and their brand has been known to be online first, right? They are really digital at heart and in nature. And what you see here is that in their own Full Story instance, they were able to do a funnel analysis, sort of over here, as you see these folks coming down through checkout, and identify that there were a number of errors happening in checkout. Some were traditional errors, some were JavaScript errors, some were frustration signals, and then use that data to decide, hey, which ones are causing the biggest impact and negative impact to conversion? They then drilled in to understand and start watching some sessions. And it's interesting. I can't pretend to tell you exactly why this potential error occurred, but what I can tell you is right here, you see on this checkout cart that this button, which is actually allowing them to add it to their bag before they proceed to checkout, is blacked out. And that blacked out button, if you were to click it multiple times, nothing would happen. That frustration really is an error and is something that a consumer would get pretty frustrated by, bounce out. And if Moose Jaw wasn't able to identify that quickly and fix it quickly, they would have the opportunity of losing a lot of sales. So what they then did is used this exact session To share it with an engineering team, no need to look it up, figure it out, try to recreate the bug. It's really something that they could identify through scale data, then get empathy through qualitative data, and very, very quickly develop a collaborative workflow with an engineer to get that fixed very, very quickly. And I think that's why they've been a customer for quite a while of FullStory, and their CTO is a pretty big fan, but especially calls out that the way they use FullStory is so critical to understanding and fixing issues quickly. And in today's world, when we're thinking about all of the different scenarios that could happen this fall and this winter, none of us know. Are we going to be all digital? Will it be a little more omni-channel with people going back in the store? The reality is we have to keep ourselves and our teams agile, and being able to understand customer data at scale with empathy is really important. The last point I'll make, which I think is going to come up quite a bit in our panel, is really about teams and how teams use data. It's fine and good to have all the tools in the world and to have all the data in the world, but if that data isn't democratized in a way that lets the teams you work with actually take action on it and agree or disagree and debate those use cases, you're sort of stuck. It's hard to take action. So the way that we certainly think about the world is that the type of data we're talking about, digital experience intelligence, should be democratized across e-commerce, across product, across engineering, across CX, so that those parties can all both understand the problems at scale and then drill in to gain some empathy. We have a lot of customers who do what they call our watch parties, and they'll watch 5 or 6 frustrating sessions to really gain some great empathy and use that context, that amazing context, to design the improvements that will help drive their business forward. So with that, I will just close on sort of parting words from us. Thank you for letting us be part of this session, Alan. It's great to be here with such great leaders. We at FullStory think everyone, consumers and businesses, will benefit from a more perfect digital experience. We'd love to help if you're interested. And we do actually have this presentation and a couple other data-driven handouts available for you at the end of the session. If there's something here that struck your fancy, please feel free to download it or connect with us online. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much, Kirsten. Really appreciate that. We're very definitely going to come back to some of those topics, particularly about finding the unknown unknowns and how teams are so critical in getting this job done. But for now, we're going to go to instant poll time. Almost. We're getting there. For everyone who joined us late, just want to remind you that in the upper right-hand corner of your screen, you can see the chat, Q&A, polls, and handouts. For the polls, which we'll launch here in just a few moments, when the question comes up on your screen and you answer it, you can watch the live responses coming in under the open sub-tab under polls, and you can see all of the responses in the close tab when the polling is done. Chat, you can use that to chat with each other. Q&A, please ask questions of our speakers. That's what we're here for. Make certain that you ask them. And if you like what you see on there, upvote them so we know which ones are most important. And if you want to ask a question anonymously, that's no worries, no problem at all. Hit us up at founders@commercenext.com. We'll be monitoring that the entire time. So there's really no reason not to get your question answered. With that, it is now actually instant poll time. We have 3 questions where we take the temperature of our audience. And so let's begin. Question number 1. What is your strategy for enhancing e-commerce experiences? First choice is we're innovators. We'll set a new course. B, we're fast followers. C, data and A/B testing will lead the way one step at a time. And D, strategy. What strategy? We fly by the seat of our pants. Definitely a clear majority. Data and A/B testing will lead the way one step at a time. And there are 3 of you that are brave enough to say, strategy, what strategy? But very definitely, data and A/B testing is the winner. 15% of you are saying you're innovators and will set a new course, and about the same is that you're fast followers. Very interesting. Kind of neat to see that. So definitely A/B testing. You guys are data-driven. All right, let's close that poll. Question number 2. What aspect of the e-commerce experience is most important for keeping people on the site? Is it product-related content? Is it a streamlined checkout experience? Is it having lifestyle or inspirational content? Easy search and navigation? Or something else? And if it is something else, please share it in the chat. Always neat to see what people are thinking. So we asked this question a couple of months ago. And very kind of unsurprisingly, we're getting this pretty much the same set of responses. It's 50-ish% of you, just north of that, easy search and navigation. Very definitely important. But also product-related content comes in at a second place at 30%. The rest are lifestyle, inspirational content around 14%. And actually, streamlined checkout barely registers at 2%. So very definitely, easy search and navigation takes the win at 55%, product-related content at 28%. All right, let's close that one. Move on to question 3. What is preventing you from improving your user experience? Your team's at capacity. Technology just can't support it. Creative can't keep up. Something else, share that in chat. Or nothing. We got this whole thing down. That's not a worry. We're not as confident now on the nothing, we've got this down strategy. What strategy? We only have one person mentioning nothing. Everyone else's team's at capacity. Yeah, what a shock. Everyone's buried in work. Interesting though, technology can't support at 27%. Now, let it give it another second here. Yep, over half say teams at capacity, 28% is technology can't support it. And interestingly, 17% of you are saying creative can't keep up. It's very, very interesting. All right, very good. Let's close that one out. And just a reminder before we bring our panel up, next week, Scott Silverman's back. He's going to be talking about the new performance marketing playbook for back to school holiday 2021 and beyond with his panel. It's at 2 p.m. on the July 28th. We've got the Commerce Next in Real Life conference in New York City. Finally get to start seeing folks in person again. That's September 28th and 29th, 2021 at the New York Hilton Midtown. You can apply for your ticket at commercenext.com. And finally, moving at elf speed, Ekta Chopra. That's our latest podcast presented by Wunderkind. Definitely check that out at commercenext.com/podcast. With that, I want to bring our panel up. Hey, everyone. All right. How's everyone doing? Good, good, good. All right. So Matt, Kirsten, and Stephanie, I think all of you have your mics muted, and now we're good to go. All right. Now we're happening. So let's make some introductions here. Sarah, do you want to start us off?
Sure. Thank you. I'm Sarah Schultz. I am the AVP for e-commerce product management and operations at Ann Taylor & Loft. I have accountability for product management, user experience, web analytics, and day-to-day site operations.
Outstanding. Matt, you're next.
I'm the Chief Technology Officer at FTD, which if you're over 40 is the flower company that you know and love. And if you're under 40, you've probably never heard of us. FTD is 110 years old. The T in the name was originally Telegraph. And I'm responsible for our whole technology footprint. So from e-com on the one end, where we collect orders, through to the network that routes them, and then the 10,000 florist distribution points and the SaaS software that we provide to them. And then all the boring stuff like printers and Ethernets and all that jazz.
Outstanding. Outstanding. And Stephanie.
Hi, I'm Stephanie Urban. I am actually in between roles right now, about to start a new VP of D2C role at an exciting shoe company next week. And I have 13 years of experience overseeing e-com and digital marketing teams.
Outstanding. So I guess let's start at what they say is at the very beginning here. I'd like to ask the group what makes or defines a great site experience in your estimation. Sarah, let's start with you again.
Sure. I think, at a very baseline, good site experience is providing users their expected experience on their terms, which is super important, however they want to shop, and consistently. I think great site experience is doing that consistently in a kind of tangibly felt or surprise and delight way, right? Because good site experience is kind of table stakes, even though it's very hard to achieve, especially consistently, almost for everyone. I think great site experiences, not just don't make me think, but also kind of outshine your competitors and have an experience that I would have a mundane conversation with my friends about over dinner. I've been in those. And I think that's really hard to achieve, but that's how I would define great site experience.
Yeah, I like the phrase that you use, tangibly felt surprise or delight, tangibly felt. So I think that's an excellent way of putting it. Matt, talk to us. What's your take on this?
I agree with all of that. I think the way I think about table stakes are speed, attractiveness, intuitiveness, like just some of the stuff that we all want from everything that we use. And then, I think it's really important to be clear about what type of customer. I think too often we get into a world where we start thinking about a single customer, or that's like this composition, this composite of all of the data we have of our customer, and it means we don't actually treat different cohorts with different needs differently. So like in our business, when someone's coming in to buy flowers for a funeral, that's very different than someone who's coming to buy flowers for an anniversary. And the way that they're engaged with has to be different, and doing that well or not is a big factor in whether or not you're delivering an excellent experience. And the other thing I'd add is not letting your corporate structure show up in your site experience, which happens all the time. Like orienting around the way the customer relates to your business, thinking about their needs instead of like, okay, great, I can see this team over here and that team over there, and forcing the customer to navigate your BS.
It's interesting. I want you to dive into that for a second before I head over to Stephanie to get her take on what constitutes a good experience. What exactly do you mean by that? Can you show me? Can you think of any examples off the top of your head?
I think we've all probably seen homepages where you can almost literally see the different pieces. It's like there was a negotiation, and the e-commerce team got 80% above the fold, and then below the fold, the brand team won. And we brought a bunch of content in. It's not the way that people shop, and I think you see that same thing when you recognize most sites, half the traffic at least doesn't enter on the homepage. So you have the opposite problem, right? You end up on these pages that are lower level, and the optimization-oriented folks are going, nope, this is my space. But actually, some people might still be meeting the customer. So like I ran the last major redesign of BMW's website and a few years ago. And one of the things we had to think about is we've got new customers coming into the site who may not know the brand. Even if they're coming in on a model page, how do I actually introduce them to why BMW matters? Because I actually have to sell the brand and the car. And that can get lost sometimes when you end up with this like gridded paint by number. You get this, I get that. It has to all come through the lens of the customer and the mental model that they use for thinking about your business, not the one that you organize around, which is almost never designed around the customer.
Right. Stephanie?
Yeah, I think similarly to what Matt just said is really breaking down the silos and mapping out that customer journey, not just through the site experience, but all of those more holistic integrated marketing channels and thinking about every step of the way. And so I think you really need to make sure that you're building your teams in order to think about it in a more 360-degree way instead of just thinking about the homepage, just thinking about the PDP and doing those things in silos.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, totally agree. Kirsten, do you have anything you want to add to this? I saw some notes coming up in the speaker private chat.
First, I'll giggle out loud. Our CEO likes to say, "Don't ship your org chart," which is very apropos to Matt's comment, right? All of us should be thinking about the customer first and thinking about some of the data that we heard. There's both table stakes and then there is delight. And one of the things that we always try to think about from an empathy standpoint is how can we better understand those different segments of users? That when you said cohorts, it really struck a chord for me and goes back to part of the earlier question is it the beginning of the journey? Is it the end of the journey? Where does this journey stop in terms of creating a delightful experience? And at my last company, we actually worried about the post-purchase delivery experience. And it turns out that that's equally important in this industry. And for a lot of our customers, I learned recently that one of the cohorts or segments we set up for them is what we call order checkers, right? People who are rapidly going back to that FTD site to go, did the flowers arrive? Did the flowers arrive? Did the flowers arrive? Or the gift from an Ann Taylor, right? They're trying to understand, I need this shirt maybe for an important board meeting. And those order checkers it's like an early warning signal for something that might be about to go wrong. So you have this opportunity to think at each step in the way, how could I delight that person to help them reduce anxiety in the receipt of the flowers or in the receipt of the blouse? So thinking a little bit further into your customer shoes and what is the empathy that you can gain from observing their experiences is one of the ways that I define creating a great.
There are different needs, post-purchase need states that don't necessarily correlate to the category that was shopped, and thinking about how to engineer for that is important. I think something you said triggered for me, like the danger with optimization is it often happens in small segments and it also often happens in silos. And we're here talking about experience, and experience is about an orchestra of things that occur in sequence and sometimes in different orders. And like, how often do we look at a purchase funnel and act like that's the way that everybody moves through something? Look at a happy path, act like that's what happens to everybody, and not actually engineer for the various non-standard and hard and messier clusters that actually are where opportunity exists.
Yeah, I could not agree more. One of the sub questions I wanted to touch on was, is customer experience primarily focused on pre-purchase or post-purchase? And it's kind of a self-answering question. It depends. I mean, obviously it's all of it, but in some cases it's going to be heavier on the post-purchase. As frequent viewers of this webinar series will know, I was involved at Vintage Tub and Bath, which is my family's company, and we would sell 450-pound cast iron clawfoot tubs. And I assure you, when those things arrive damaged or late or are dropped off in a driveway and no one's there to move it, you definitely have some post-sale things you need to deal with. And I do remember looking at our analytics and saying, gee, a lot of people are checking on their orders. Like some just really do it. And that's exactly what it was. People are very, very concerned about when that big object's going to arrive. And I'm certain, like with flowers or things that there's a high emotional value, that's definitely the case. So we'd all agree. Experience definitely transcends both pre and post sale. It has to be looked at holistically as well as in specific cohorts or parts. I guess.
Customers don't think this way, right? Like,
what's that?
Customers don't draw a distinction between your site experience, your post-purchase experience, your pre. It's all one thing. So if you disrespect them in an ad, it doesn't matter what happens after. And if the site experience was great and then you park it on the delivery, it doesn't matter either. So like, it's sort of like version of that.
They're not coming back. Like, they're not kind of segmenting in their experience. Like, I had such a pleasurable experience during my browse time. If only the delivery was on time. I'll still do it again for that hit I got from browsing. That's not how right. If the package doesn't arrive on time, they're not going to shop with you again, no matter how much serotonin comes out of their browse session on your site. They just don't think like that, right? And that's why we can't.
I don't know how much serotonin comes out when you buy a high tank toilet. At least that was my experience. But clearly others definitely enjoy.
Depends.
Hey,
it's like people are checking for that delivery.
There's a passion there. There's a passion there. Maybe I just sold too many of them. That was the problem. I got numb. So let's talk about. So one of the things I want to do is I want to talk about both the art and the science on this topic. And everyone, I want to hit both. But I want to start with the art portion of this. I want to talk about, specifically the creative elements that you're seeing working. What's not working. What role does video play in user-generated content? Stephanie, any thoughts on this one?
Yeah, I mean, I think for the teams that I've tried to build, it's so important for us to have a deliberate testing strategy for all channels, but obviously with site. And I think, a lot of brands have A/B testing, but if you're not super deliberate about planning those things out, following through, and then sharing the learnings. And I think a big piece of that is sharing the learnings back with the creative team and celebrating wins and sharing what's working and what's not working and getting them super excited about those KPIs and how they're able to impact the business. I think that really helps drive, cross collaboration and excitement for something that might otherwise be a little bit boring or seem tedious when they're creating extra versions of site creative. So I think being deliberate about it and then sharing it back is key.
Mm-hmm. Sarah?
I think it's so tempting sometimes in these conversations to say these are the elements on the site that are working for us. And there are a couple that are somewhat universal depending, right? But I think it really just goes back to really appreciating the customer experience and the customer journey, right? So you can say things like transactional elements, especially things UGC, clients tend to really trust each other or experts, in our case, store associates. And so we get a lot of interaction with UGC and some of the kind of product consideration transactional elements, especially for people that are looking to make a purchase in that session. But not everybody is looking to make a purchase in that session. To Matt's point about BMW, some people are new to us, or they're really just looking to browse, or they need to really appreciate kind of the brand experience, right? And I think it's important context for a conversation like this, where we're talking about the importance of including data in your data-driven decisions. The art, science without the art is going to result in a page that's just all transactional elements. And after a couple of months, you're not even going to have your clients that know and love your brand coming back because they need to be like wooed N1, you know? So I think there needs to be a balance that is supported by data, whether it's transactional elements like kind of product finding methods and outfitting, product recommendations, reviews, kind of UGC, and then also like the art of branding kind of mixed in. And a lot of the tools that provide data and help you ultimately make those decisions can give you data on both of those things, right? I think it's very easy, especially sometimes product and UX teams get branded like we're here just to make those kind of conversion KPIs happen. But a lot of the tools out there that can help you with client experience backed by data will tell you really insightful things about your kind of brand and more creative elements on your site, about where to put them when they're being engaged with, and how those play with some of the other elements. So I think it's kind of a mix of things, and it really depends on your goals, but it does have to be a mix of art and science that are both supported by data.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I totally agree. Kirsten, you had some thoughts on this. You've got a kind of a 30,000-foot view from Full Story. You see this over multiple clients. Is there any color commentary you want to add on this one?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things that I agree with, I think every client has the same challenge that Sarah just articulated, this balance of short-term versus long-term, balance of tight merchandising of the thing that's going to convert best with the really emotion-driving, brand affinity creating experience that might be more brand-oriented. But it really depends by category, right? We see certainly luxury brands and or considered purchases taking a really different approach to what a basics or essentials might be doing. And they are combining, to that point, the art and the science, right? They're taking some level, and I would say the combination of actual user engagement data, plus maybe some VOC, along with transactional data, to really understand where is there a happy path, where is the blend, and how do you decide, what do I need to do today if I need to really work on a metric, versus what am I willing to invest in for tomorrow, and having very open-minded and open-ended dialogues about it. I think one of the areas, though, where your art and science aren't yet very good, and we need to lean into the science a bit to get better at our art, is in mobile. Right now, mobile is still, relatively speaking, young in terms of what we observe from the behaviors of our customers. Things that we take for granted in the traditional web experience are very different in terms of user behavior in a mobile experience. What does it look like to filter? What am I willing to buy? How much money will I spend? Am I just trying to get to know you as a brand, right? Those things are very, very different. And we certainly see that there needs to be more investment in learning about the science so we can make more artful decisions in mobile. Matt,
you clearly have nothing to say on this point, correct?
Unfortunately for everyone listening and in the room, I'm a blowhard. I have something to say about everything you asked me. But I'm also very interested in these other very smart people's perspectives. So I can easily
go for it. I'm just seeing that you're typing feverishly into our notes.
This conversation is making me think about things. And firstly, I worry often about the definition of creativity in a conversation like this, or art in a conversation like this. Because in my opinion, it's the most creative solution to the most annoying problem, which doesn't always express itself in a way that might look like creative. And so I think it's just important, and I spent 20 years in agency land, and so I'm a little jaded because of this, because in agency land, it's almost exclusively what's the shiniest object and not what's going to create value. And so you end up chasing stuff that is lipstick on a pig, instead of solving very obvious problems that people have real needs around. One of the problems that we have is most often when folks are ordering in a sympathy context, so for funeral, bereavement, this kind of thing, they often don't have good data about exactly when the service is and exactly where the service is. Is the service at the funeral home? Is it at the cemetery? Is it at someone's house? Are people going? Are they not? Whatever. A huge problem I could solve is give people a way to not have to dig for answers from the bereaved, but still make sure that the flowers got to the right place at the right time. That's not going to show up as a video or an animated GIF or augmented reality or something that's going to be talked about in Cannes. But it will change the outcome for a bunch of people who are in a terrible situation. And I just think it's important that kind of creativity is on the map here. Because real powerful work can be done, and what for people who stare at a business every day feels like blocking and tackling. It's like, no, I want to do something new. It's like something new is maybe solving the biggest problem that really, really gets in the way for people. It could be product development sometimes. Hey, we don't make any blush for this skin tone. We probably should do that, right? That insight comes from the fact that we've got this cohort of people that are coming here and looking for this thing and they're not finding it. Look at what people are doing in your on-site search. What kinds of problems are they bringing to you in on-site search, and are you solving them? Or are you just like chasing the next dumb gee whiz idea that some SaaS company is stuffing down your throat because it's going to drive a quarter point in conversion?
No, I dig it. It's very interesting. I think so. From my perspective, it's been a while since I've been in on the retailer side, and I'm kind of surprised at how many times, like every webinar we prep, you get into a conversation with the sponsor and you ask them, what are you seeing? Well, retailers are just missing the basics here. It's like they just get so into the weeds that you try to pull them out and say, look, you really need to take care of this core thing. Nope. We're going to stay in the weeds. So it's this constant tension between doing the tactical, thinking about the strategic. And I agree with you. I think creative is broader than just what pretty image can we make.
Well, and until you can package the strategic in the language of the tactical, you're either dead to only do tactical, or you're in an organization, you're going to have the other problem. It needs to be one language. That's my biggest learning being in private equity now, like everything has to be substantiated against a ROI analysis that private equity can relate to. And I actually think that's good discipline for most businesses. If I had known in agency land what I know now about that, it would have been dangerous to compete against me.
Well, that's true. Any other thoughts? I don't want to cut off any conversation any questions the panel has. Matt's brought up quite a few points here. Nope. Okay. We'll move right along. So let's talk about tensions. All right. If we've got tensions between the strategic and the tactical, don't we also have tensions between the brand and performance? Right. Like that's yet another set of tensions. And I'd be really interested to hear what Sarah and Stephanie have to say to that point. You brushed against it earlier. I just want to make certain we get into that question. Sarah, do you want to take that one?
Sure. I think it goes just back to, I think, in the world today, all we talk about is being data-driven, listen to the customer. And I think you would ask any organization, are you data-driven? Are you customer-focused? And everyone would say yes. And they would be right directionally. And I think what happens when you try to introduce kind of like hard and fast data to support decisions, you make better decisions, but some, kind of longer game, especially when you're talking about branding, brand identity, LTV, all of those things, they can still be supported by data, but it needs to kind of be tracked and appreciated differently. And I think, especially if you are kind of fighting a day-to-day tactical fire, it's much easier to use data and be very, very focused on kind of like day in and day out performance. But again, there is a blend to the art and the science. Like you're not going to have a website that's successful and a growing and, satiated client base that is not being won by the brand, right? So I think it's about using data to support, like I was saying before, both of those things, right? It's not true that you can't support brand initiatives with data. That you just kind of have to take a different tack and a different approach to it. So in theory, they shouldn't be at odds. And that's why I think organizationally, if you're in product management or UX, like your job is to support both of those things with data. And it's important that all teams know that they can be supported like that. And they become part of the database conversation, not just like the transactional elements that we kind of can support kind of in real time with data and A/B testing, and not take a different take to some of the more like creative elements. It's not always the same approach, but it can be like directionally supported by the same kind of decision-making process that a lot of the new kind of like tools, and not even new tools, that, existing tools applied a different way in a different conversation internally can help with, if that makes sense.
One thing I think we also talked about in the before a little bit was, I think, one of the evolutions that's happened lately, and I'd be curious to learn a little more. We heard folks talk about a little bit that some of this feels like the long-term versus the short-term. And we talk about metrics like lifetime value, moving from a metric that used to be in other industries and becoming much more part of a metric that is part of an e-commerce brand's ecosystem, and how people then think about cohorting and VIP customers and all of those things is fascinating, particularly for many of the types of businesses that you're in. I'm thinking that folks would love to hear a little bit about how you each think about, when do I think about lifetime value? When do I think about cart conversion metrics? And how do I think about how those play together relevant to the themes that you just mentioned?
It's like you read my mind. I saw this. We're start taking audience questions, and Alex Baker, who is incidentally calling in from Sleepy Hollow, yes, I read that in the chat, has asked the question, what are the most important conversion metrics you're hearing from e-commerce brands and clients? And it's like everyone wants to talk KPIs, and so do I. Stephanie, we're going to bring you back into the conversation here. What do you say? What are your favorite KPIs along these lines?
Yeah, I mean, I think definitely LTV is becoming bigger and bigger every year, and you can get more granular now in measuring that within the site experience. So I think just tying back to the last question too, like an exercise that I like to do because I've lived on both the marketing and the e-com side is cover up the logo on various pages across your site. And can you recognize what brand that is? And if you can't really identify who that is, like, I don't think you have the branding pieces correct. So you can have, like Sarah's mentioned, all these amazing transactional, conversion-driven design tactics across the site. But if you don't also bring in that branding element, I don't think you will also be driving through that LTV because they could shop elsewhere.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Sarah? Anything to add on that?
I would echo kind of what Stephanie said, and something that we talked about in prep too is like, I think it depends on like what kind of user journey you're looking at. So like we'll track users that we know are return users or return clients or loyalty clients differently than someone who we know was on their first visit, or we can assume is on their first visit, maybe is new to us, right? So like we're not looking at some of like the core transactional conversion metrics in some of those kind of customer journeys because they're not likely to be the ones that are valuable. So I think kind of, also from a user experience perspective, I think sometimes we'll look, depending on the scenario, like on time on site, obviously some of the basic like bounce rate, conversion rate, revenue per visit, but also to Stephanie's point, some of the longer term, like we know that it takes both new and returning clients multiple trips to actually close a deal with us. Because that's the nature of kind of shopping, right? So it kind of depends on like where in their journey they are. And we have different strategies, right? For different parts of the customer journey and also different segments.
Mm-hmm. Matt, you have to clearly have some thoughts on this. And by the way, thank you, Jennifer Abel, for your comment about Matt. It was like he was in every one of your marketing, brand, and product meetings.
If you ever watch Family Guy, there's a whole episode where Peter keeps talking about what grinds his gears. I'm good at grinding. What to grind gears with. But when we think about metrics, we like to break them into two buckets. Success metrics, which are like the actual sort of scoreboard, the things that matter that you're trying to drive, and then a battery of diagnostic metrics that help you tune those things. And the success metrics, we try to squeeze them down to as few as possible so that they can balance one another. And in our experience, optimizing traffic to Ebitda is the kind of short-term optimization thinking that's really important to get as much out of every visit as possible. And it gets really interesting because with our dropship business and our florist business, there's about 10,000 different ways we can fulfill something. And then does it go ground? Does it go air? Do we zone jump? Do we not? Is it buy online, pick up in store? And so even the buy online, pick up in store changes the unit economics for most people. So it's important for us to think about adjusted EBIT, because if we optimize to AOV, actually, that can be a problem for us because we might sell something that we make less money on, even though it looks like we make more money on it. The conversion is harder because the price point is higher. So that's why we optimize to EBIT, because it balances every ingredient into that, including the marketing cost. We can spend more on a discount if a person came from a cheaper channel. We think about all that stuff. But then we also optimize to LTV, because LTV is a way for us to think about the way that the things that we're doing in aggregate impact a long-term impression of the business. And then for us, we worry about site NPS because we think that's an important success metric in terms of like word of mouth. And we worry about shipping margin too, because again, there's so much, it's so dynamic the way we do shipping that it can be the difference between losing money on shipping or making money on shipping. And so those are our big success metrics. And then you look at everything after that, attachment rate, UPT, conversion rate on every page, cart to confirm, like everything that helps you to expose the barriers and the mindset of the buyer as they move through your ecosystem.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. I want to get to some of the audience questions here. And again, everyone watching and listening, thank you so much for asking these questions. It's always fun to go through them. This one's from Joe Howard. He asks, any thoughts on checkout? How different should it be for a desktop versus mobile? Also, customers are adopting new payments like buy now, pay later, Apple Pay, etc. How do you offer what customers want without overwhelming customers at checkout? Stephanie, I'm going to come back to you if you have any initial thoughts on that one.
That's a tricky one. I think I would even start with a survey of your existing top customers to see which checkout options they're most looking for. Just because there are so many options, and I prefer having a very uncluttered checkout. So I think listening to the customer and getting that data firsthand would be helpful as far as making decisions from that standpoint. And then I think, again, yes, leveraging UX testing and learning as much as possible before Q4, I guess I would say, within the checkout experience, and making sure that you're leveraging whatever data sets you have to prove what you're doing is incrementally improving versus hurting.
Mm-hmm. Kirsten, you again have the macro view here. Any thoughts on that question?
I think what I'd say, I don't have offhand data on sort of like who's winning the checkout wars or how many is the right amount. I really think it depends by business. And certainly I think our observation is that it's having a hypothesis first and then following through with a really smart A/B test, to Stephanie's point, right? It's something that you have to learn through your audience. Now, you can start with macro level audience insights. Who are my personas? How do they purchase? What other sites do they frequent? What are the expectations that they've been sort of inoculated into? And then what do I want to test? Probably only one at a time. We actually saw, it's related, but kind of different. We saw a customer who had put multiple different security logos on their checkout page, thinking that it would build trust. One of them happened to be a MasterCard logo that was about MasterCard trust, not about paying with MasterCard. And it caused so much user conversion that it actually dropped conversion by 7%. They removed a logo, just the logo, just, social proof kind of logo, and conversion went back up 7%. So, right, it is, what I can certainly say is checkout is very sensitive. So have a very high hypothesis and proceed with testing and caution, because one change can make a massive difference to the positive or negative.
Yeah, I mean, more is not better, I think, as a rule. I think sometimes there's this kind of what I would say is flawed thinking. Like, we need to avoid the TGI Friday-fication of checkout, right? Like, we don't need more flair, we need less flair. Decision fatigue is a real thing. And even if you have clients sometimes clients use multiple of those kind of newer age, like one-click kind of checkout options. Like, I think it's about having a tight but data-driven kind of hierarchy of those. And to Stephanie's point, if you're trying to consider new payment methods, there's a bunch of different data points you probably already have directionally and surveying and all of that stuff that you can do to figure out what the next best test I would recommend would be. Also, again, one at a time. And then whenever you're doing that, you also have to kind of track your other payment methods to see, is this incremental? Are we seeing different user experience KPIs with these? Or is it just shift and or potentially cannibalization of some other somewhat lucrative kind of like strategic kind of checkout payment placements that is helpful to your client, but is actually not helping your business, and it's a wash. But I do think the kind of old way of thinking used to be like, put everything on there so the client feels like they have a choice and they can, like, we're here for them however they want to show up and checkout. Checkout is like it's designed to be the most unsexy but important page to close a deal. And to an extent, you want to keep it that way. Like, differentiation for differentiation's sake shouldn't happen, period, in e-com, and absolutely not in checkout as a rule. But I don't feel strongly about any of this.
No. Clearly, it's whatever, however you roll.
I will say, though, agreeing with all that, I think that accelerated payments are a huge benefit if the right choice is made, particularly in mobile, because, like, if you've shopped between more than one Shopify site as a part of the same session, maybe you were on Allbirds and you went to Gymshark, and you notice how they don't even ask you to log in again. You just are able to check out without entering anything from one other. It is hard to do something that's that light in terms of friction. And even when you do have to log in, text to phone, enter a 5 or 6 digit number, done, no typing anything else. That stuff matters, man. So I think the trick is, like, And I think there's an opportunity to do personalization here that some people don't take advantage of. Like maybe we don't care about greeting the person by their name, but maybe using the data that we have to make a better decision about which checkout options to show them so that nobody ever sees more than 1 or 2 or 3, whatever it is, but it's the right one for that audience. Because if you look, you're going to see patterns that people who buy at this price point tend to be more likely to use this. If someone's buying a $5,000 dress or something, they probably aren't going to buy now, pay later, probably. So you can make some inferences based on patterns and use those inferences to present the right reduced choice that accelerates the conversion and eliminates friction. But you better have everything else dialed in pretty tight before you start playing those kinds of reindeer games.
Yeah. I can't believe we are at 4 minutes before the hour. Vicky asked a question from the audience about delightful examples, but I have to get to this one question. And it focuses on what Kirsten said earlier about the unknown unknowns. I would like to know how the panel susses out those problems that you don't know about, right? You don't even know to look there. And that's, I think, what Full Story's technology does really well, like with rage clicking and the like, and Kirsten talked about that. But Stephanie, I think when we were talking earlier, I think you mentioned some of the ways that you kind of tease the data, and I'd like to get that answer in.
Sure. So when I've gone through redesign projects or replatforms, we've used usertesting.com to essentially use a panel. You can also try to limit that to actual customers or just anything that really falls in your key demographics. And then you get a panel of customers going through that user experience and whatever testing criteria you'd like them to do. And then you get all of that feedback in one place. And then also just having the team kind of go in and do group QA in a very extensive, documented way across devices, but also kind of shopping how they shop, because as we've been talking about, everyone shops in a different way and it's not always that happy path. So, but I think something like Full Story obviously helps you do that at scale.
Yeah, I mean, I would just jump in to say, I think it can be bi-directional, right? Like a lot of our proactive testing starts with a hypothesis on our side that then we test into and we use the data to validate, or, it's a confirm or deny. But the products like Full Story and some of the kind of more nascent like digital analytics tools, another way to approach that is to actually just look at the data and try to find anomalies. Like, don't start with a question you're trying to answer. Just look at the data and says, like, what here surprises me, right? And platforms like that make it very easy to do that in ways that you haven't been able to do before. And then agreeing with Stephanie, not that any of us is into counterterrorism, but it's almost like the Homeland red kind of string board between user testing and products like Full Story and your core analytics and kind of questions you might have. A lot of it is kind of the material makeup of the inputs you have. That might point you in a direction, and then you can further use those same tools to say which way is the wind blowing, right? And kind of go from there. So I think there's a lot of entry points from different directions. It's not just proactive kind of
I
question.
love the mental image of the red strings, because I've never known to figure out what the hell those strings are for and how they're in any way helpful for problem solving. Yeah. But everyone has them. I started watching Manifest the other day, and they're full of these strings. But I think you're right. I think you have to go looking. My favorite thing to do is talk to people who other people don't typically listen to and ask them about the thing they want me to ignore. So often in a conversation, people will go telling you something else. They mention something parenthetically. In 99% of cases, that's the thing I care about. And so that might be a customer service agent. In our case, it's our florist network. And someone says, oh, well, there's this, but you could never do anything about that. I go, well, wait, what? And you start asking these questions that are about really falling down a rabbit hole. And I think that's where you find those unknown unknowns, because if they're totally unknown, then they don't exist. Someone is bumping into this issue and aware of it, this opportunity, this idea, this thing. And the trick is just to be antennas up enough that when you hear one of those things from a person who's not supposed to have an opinion about the website, the receptionist, the cook in the cafeteria who's been at the business a long time, whatever, who says, well, there's this thing, that shit is gold.
Yeah, when I was CMO at Vintage Tub, I was in charge of both customer service and merchandising, and had a very close relationship with the person running marketing. And I would force the merchandisers and the marketing staff to take one day a month in the customer service department. Yeah, now you start seeing problems getting solved, because they don't want to sit there and ask, where's that schematic for that tub for the 900th time? And all of a sudden, the user experience gets really good. Kirsten, you have the last word as the sponsor.
Well, I love that. I was
Go
going
for
to say the couple of things that you guys all just talked about. You talked about empathy, Alan. Getting empathy through being in your customer agent's shoes or being in your customer's shoes is really important. But as well, Matt and Sarah both talked about sort of not making assumptions, right? We come with our own biases around what that happy path should be. I think one of the most important things we can do here is remove our biases, remove those blinders and lenses, and look at customers' actual behavior to understand what's going on. There's kind of a really interesting analogy in the real world. If we all agree that Walt Disney and the Disney companies designed some amazing parks, then you may know the story where their landscape designer started with an idea, built it, and I would say called it an MVP. They put the landscape out there, and then they watched what their users really did. They watched where those patterns were. They watched where the grass was trampled down, and they said, oh, to get to Epcot, it's better to go this way. Let's redesign it on behalf of our users and be really empathetic towards them. And that's where I would say something like a Full Story or other digital experience intelligence tools can help you think about what is that real path, not just the original happy path, that can help bring a delightful experience both to your customers, but to you as a brand, right? That will help you win as a brand while uncovering those unknown unknowns.
Sounds great. Well, I just want to remind the entire audience that you can download the presentation from Full Story, as well as some additional documentation they provided us up in the upper right-hand corner. To all of our speakers, Kirsten, Sarah, Matt, and Stephanie, thank you so much for taking the time to be with us today and preparing for this. As always, it's a real joy to have you guys on. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And finally, I want to thank our audience. Thank you for so much for joining us today, spending the time with us. We hope it was worth your time. You'll see that there's a survey at the end of this when we close out. We'd certainly appreciate hearing your thoughts. And with that, I will close out. I'm Alan Dick, and on behalf of everyone here at Commerce Next, we hope you enjoyed the webinar and hope you have a great week. Take care, everyone.